This is scene 8. Uh, start back when we moved to Norman, and I bought the house at 3907 Shine Cross Court. This house cost $56,000, and as of today it's worth, I figure, at least 10 times that amount. We've loved this house. It's been very good from the standpoint of having plenty of room for our kids growing up, and for having a good-sized yard where I could have a garden, and where I could be close to a park where we love to walk our dogs. And so it has just been a great place to live for the past 50 years. We've had great neighbors. We have become very, very close friends with many of them. Several of them have lived here nearly as long as we have. One neighbor in particular has been Barney Blue, who has been our family physician since the early 80s. And Barney lives just across the street from us. And then we have Bob McCloy and Curtis. Bob was a retired physician who was over the emergency room in Norman. And another neighbor across the way was Bud and Julie Miles, who very dear friends of ours. Bud went on to create a very large architectural firm called Miles Associates. We had neighbors by the name of Johnson, who were Tom and his family were here only a couple of years before he moved down to San Antonio to run a dealership where he became very wealthy. Across the street from us is Tom Johnson, and his wife was my distant cousin we found, and her name was Sharon, and we shared a great-great-grandfather. And Tom lived there. Tom and Sharon and his family lived there for a couple of years before he created his own investment firm, and he became extremely wealthy and moved out of the neighborhood, but still within a couple of blocks. And we also had Bob and Sylvia Danner, who were, Bob Danner was associated with the space program early in his career as an engineer, and he later on became involved with a chemical firm that he bought named Biocide, which caused him to move here to Norman, and Bob's firm grew very big, and he became extremely wealthy. And another neighbor that lived behind us, to the north of us, was Robert and Jenan, Manchester. Robert was a very successful attorney, and he was a very dear friend of ours. He and Jenan and the family. And then next to, across the street from them was Clayton and Darla Lee, who lived in 2 different houses in our cul-de-sac, and they moved on to St. Louis several years back. And there was the Kellers, and several others that Spivey, Stacy Spivey, his attorney, and her husband Jorge, who was an architect, and he worked under Bud Miles, and later on became president of Bud Miles architectural firm. So, and then later on we had Jenny Garrett and her husband and family that moved across the street from us, very dear friends. And I hope I'm not leaving out anybody. All the painters, the Ed and his head painter and his family, Mary was his wife's name. So we've just had a great association here with many of our friends. And we continue with friendships. Several have passed on over the years as they aged with different kinds of illnesses and other causes of death. When I worked for Star, my job was to create a manufacturing operation to produce roofing panels. This was in 1974, when everybody believed we were completely running out of energy, that we had a big crisis. It was due to OPEC cutting off our supply of oil, and everybody was reacting to that, to lower the speed limit to 55 miles an hour on the highways, to turn off your lights and not turn on Christmas lights. Price of gas nearly doubled. Everybody, all the car manufacturers started producing smaller cars. So it was it was pretty obvious to everybody at that time that we were running out of oil, and that we had problems. That, of course, has been corrected in the past 15 years or so with the horizontal drilling techniques and other things, which has completely changed the picture from the standpoint of the oil producibility, so that we are now nearly, if not completely, energy independent from the standpoint of oil and gas. Indeed, we now shipping it to other countries. But back in the 1974, this wasn't the case at all, and it looked like the roofing product, which was which is composed of two sheets of metal, which we put what we call an isocyanurate foam, which was a fire retardant foam. In between, in that foam layer, was about 2 to 3 inches thick. And then on the top sheet, which is exposed to the atmosphere, was a material called Hypalon, which was a rubberized plastic which actually improved with age as it is exposed to ultraviolet light. And the panels were joined together through something that was called a zipper. It's very much like the plastic bags that you zip together. That's where the idea came from, that joined the panels together on top of the roof. The panels themselves were typically about 10 foot long by about 3 foot wide and a couple of inches thick. It was an excellent product, and I hired several engineers and people for producing, working on the factory floor, and all the other kinds of positions to make a manufacturing operation successful. And we were successful. We figured out everything that was necessary to produce a quality panel, and we were intending to create other plants other than the one in Oklahoma City and other locations throughout the United States to reduce shipping costs. And just as we were getting ready to expand and possibly get into a deal with John Mansfield Corporation, the man who owned the company was in his 80s and just didn't like the newfangled products. And of course, in the developmental stages, which had been going on for 2 or 3 years, it was a losing proposition, and all he saw was money going up. He didn't see a future for it and didn't want to keep on developing it and spending money. So I had been working there for about 1.5 years. One day I came to work and found that he had told them that he wanted it shut down and everybody associated with it to leave the company. And that included the president and the vice president that I reported to and all of us. And they gave us 4 hours to clean out our desk and leave. So I came home and gave Brenda the news, and she started to cry, and I said, "Well, why are you crying?" She said, "We'll have to move again. I just fell in love with this place and I want to move again." And I said, "Well, we won't move again. I'll find a job here. Don't worry about it." Well, I found that it wasn't that easy to find a job that I really wanted. This was in October of 1975, and so after a couple months of looking for a job and sending my resume out, I had been offered some positions, but they were not in the local area. And so I decided I'll get my doctorate and I'll teach. And I'll get my doctorate in industrial engineering management, not having any thought out plans on how I was going to be able to support my family. But I had to make some plans. and I was accepted into the doctoral program there. Well, then one day, toward the end of December, I got a call, and it was a guy from the Department of Corrections, and he said, we want to interview you for the job. And I said, well, I haven't sent you a resume. He said, yeah, we've got it right here. We put out a blind ad. We didn't think anybody with your background would apply to a state agency, the Department of Corrections. And they were right, I wouldn't have. But anyway, the hiring process was conducted on December the 31st, 1975, and I have made a videotape of a ceremony where I talk about that. And if you care to look at that, it's the documentary where they later on named the administrative building of the industry operation in my honor. And so I give, there's a good videotape of that ceremony. So I won't go into a lot of the detail of that, except that to say I enjoyed the work. I found it both interesting and challenging and rewarding. It gave me the opportunity to travel throughout the state, to be associated with a lot of excellent administrators and other capable people. It gave me pretty much all the time freedom of action to do as I thought best as far as operating the industry program. Most of the people in the Department of Corrections understood that they didn't understand anything about the kind of operation that I was running, and let me have free rein to do as I thought best. And I certainly appreciate that. There were a couple that thought they knew better and interfered with the operation, but I prefer not to even discuss them. They didn't last that long, and most of them were relieved of their positions anyway. Anyway, I created operations throughout the state. I had operations in 9 different locations with 25 operations. Eventually I got my sales up to 15 million with a profit of $1.5 million a year. And so it was a totally self-supporting operation, and we plowed the profits back into expanding the industry program. That industry program was conceived as something that was necessary to give training and work to the inmates. It was all states basically had similar kinds of programs, and Oklahoma had a basic program, but it was all in Oklahoma State Penitentiary, and all of that operation was burned down in a riot in 1973 at the prison. And so they hired Dr. Ned Benton to come up with a plan that would replace and expand programs, the institutions throughout the state. The idea was to have smaller regional prisons where we won't have such a big, massive amount of inmates where that would better give them the better ability to control things. And so my job was to put work programs, industry operations into each location to keep the inmates employed and produce good goods to sell and to give inmates training. And we were very successful at that. I was able to hire some excellent engineers and other accountants and other personnel that necessary to operate a industry operation. It was a regular business operation, and we enjoyed it very much. There are numerous materials that you can have access to. There are on the computer and other things that where you can read up on the industry operation if you are interested. I retired from that operation in the year February 1st, 2000. I think I will stop on this scene recording and come back and discuss the farming operation with the next thing.